All right, Table Talkers, we're in session 13 in this series that we're calling Stories to Live By on the parables of Jesus. And I understand from conversations we've had that at least two of you find this to be the most exciting of all the parables that we're covering. I think, Cynthia, you said this is your favorite parable of Jesus, not just the ones we're covering, but of all the parables of Jesus, this is your favorite parable. Why don't we begin with you reading the whole thing to us from Matthew 25, verses 13 through 30, or you might want to start with verse 14, whatever you prefer. I think verse 13 is actually a part of it because verse 14 begins with 4. Okay.
It says in 13, "Therefore keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 bags more. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. But the man who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. 'Master,' he said, 'you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have gained 5 more.' His master replied, 'Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness.' The man with 2 bags of gold also came. 'Master,' he said, 'you entrusted me with 2 bags of gold. See, I have gained 2 more.' His master replied, 'Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness.' Then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. 'Master,' he said, 'I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you.' His master replied, 'You wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed? Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the banker so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. So take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.'"
Boom! What version are you reading?
NIV.
NIV, and instead of saying talents, it says bags of gold. And this is accurate because the word talent, we don't use the word. We think of it in terms of like a human being has abilities, and currency, like dollar bills, is a form of ability to get things done in the world, right? So bags of gold is an accurate translation. It's a currency. Right?
Well, it's actually a measure of weight. A talent is a weight.
Yeah, of a currency.
And the NIV even takes a little liberty there because it says bags of gold, but we actually don't know. It could have been copper, could have been silver. We don't know, but
it doesn't matter. The point is each one is given.
A measure.
What was it? 1, 2, and 5.
1, 2, and 5. And the reason I think that the NIV goes with gold is clearly what Jesus is communicating here, and what would have been understood to those that were first hearing it, is these are considerable sums of money. That's the point. These are considerable sums. It's not like, here's $50, here's $20, here's $10. It's something more like, here's 50,000 or even 500,000. Here's 20 or 200. These are large sums of money by modern standards.
Right.
Okay.
So Cynthia, why do you regard this as your favorite parable? Do you have a...
So I have a little bit of a personal story of when I was working at a private equity fund, which is just a company that basically does investments on behalf of people who, put their money into the fund. And when I was thinking about, I was doing a Bible study or something for just myself, and I remember reading this passage in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 20, where it says, "Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies." So when I thought about this and I read this parable, it made me think, oh, God is like an investor, because at the time I was working for a private equity fund, which is essentially managing assets for people, right? People put their money into this fund because they expected me and my firm at the time to generate a return on the investment. And so as I thought about God in this parable, as well as in this verse where he said, you were bought at a price. So we are effectively asset managers for everything that God has given us to manage.
I love that. We're asset managers.
Just like I was an asset manager effectively for my clients at the time, I was like, oh, God is effectively my client, and he is expecting me to generate a return on the investment he placed in me. First, because he redeemed my life, which is what this verse is talking about. But secondly, because he blesses all of us with a variety of resources and assets to manage. It could be our time, our literal talents, education, our resources, our influence, our position. Everything is an asset that God expects us to manage.
I like the word asset. So this could be the parable of the assets.
Right.
Right? So, and you broadened that to include every single thing that any of us possess that can be leveraged for gain.
Right. And so you made the point that this is a lot of money in the parable. Similarly, we're all given a significant amount of resources. I don't care who you are, you have time, you have your life, you have the ability to do something.
Correct.
And so this parable made me realize, wow, I need to think about my assets and what I'm managing as seriously as I was doing professionally at the time for my clients.
So that's why it's your favorite parable. I love that.
It's empowering, isn't it? Because it's not whether or not you received something. It's not whether or not you have something, but it's what do you have and what you're doing with it. So that's very empowering.
Right.
And what I thought was super interesting as I was reflecting on this parable is that it's effectively an investment cycle in the Bible where God gives people something everybody is given something to manage. And there's multiple characters who took what God gave them and multiplied that investment over time. So if you think about like Hannah, she was praying for a child. God gives her a child. She does a great job raising Samuel. And at the end of the story, she gets 5 more children.
Oh, that's a great comparison, yeah.
Job gets more resources after he's faithful under a very difficult trial where he basically testifies that he believes that God is good and God gives him twice as much as he had before.
What about the story of Joseph?
Exactly.
Which is one of the most incredible stories in the Bible, right? And it's all about him using whatever he has at his disposal, and it just expands and expands and expands.
You can see over and over, Daniel and his 3 friends, they are faithful in a very difficult situation where they're under captivity, and as a result of their faithfulness, God makes them 10 times more intelligent, smarter than the other people around them.
Daniel ends up actually being second in command in the kingdom of Babylon, as Joseph ends up being second in command in Egypt, right?
So you see this investment cycle, and that's exactly what this parable is talking about. God is just like any of us would be if we were giving someone else to manage our assets. He expects us to generate a return.
Maybe a question to put on the table in light of what you've said, Cynthia, which I think the question sets the table, maybe it could launch us into something. Is the man distributing the talents, is he being unfair? I mean, why does one receive 1, 2, 5?
Well, I think my view on that is no, I don't think it's arbitrary. I think it has to do with aptitudes. In the same way that I have 2 sons, and they have different aptitudes. They are different ages. When they were younger, the age difference meant more than it does now. But even now, they have different aptitudes. I would trust my youngest son with more of a certain kind of thing, and I would trust my older son. Like, he's very relationally attuned. He's great with people. So if I was going to throw a party or something, I'd put Jabel in more charge. If I was trying to get a job done to accomplish something, I'd put Landon more in charge. So in this particular case, I see it as and I'll get to this a little bit later because I have a thing I'm really excited about here. But I think that this is a man who is incredibly attuned to the individual aptitudes, attitudes, capacities of his people. And he says 5, 2, 1, giving all of them an opportunity to leverage what it is that they bring to the table to see what they can do with it.
It's interesting because what you're saying then is that it's in the best interest of the receiver that he received 1 instead of 5.
Correct.
Had he received 5, that would have been a miscalculation.
Correct.
Given their mental disposition, their experience.
Right.
So it's interesting that it's not arbitrary and unfair, but it's actually in the best interest of the receiver. I can do more with 2 than I could do with 5. And so God, in his mercy, puts me in the most favorable position.
I think it's a fantastic point because it literally says he gave each according to his ability.
His ability, right.
And in a professional sense, I see this all the time, right? Because I work with executives and we're often evaluating people to take on very important roles in companies. right?
Or not.
Or not, right? And when we look at it, it's all based on what are they being asked to do in the role. What we say is we often rank people as like A versus B versus C in a particular role in terms of how likely are they to deliver on the outcomes that they're going to be required to deliver on. We say it's not like there's only B players and only A players. It's all role dependent. Someone who is an A player in this role could be a B player in this other role.
This is my point about Landon and Jabel.
So this is not a statement on an individual's innate value.
No, it's
one
the
received
role.
5, 1, 2.
It's ability. It's on
It's
ability.
based on what they're being asked to do.
Yeah.
And we do live in a time right now where the notion is, at least here in America, the notion is that everybody should be fundamentally equal in like all the ways that you can be equal. I think this is crazy. I'm never going to be an NBA basketball player. That's just not going to happen. I'm too old. I'm not tall enough. I'm not athletic enough. So I don't have that expectation. I don't have that capacity. But we live in a time right now where we'll hear people say, I think unwisely, and it's very platitudinous, but you can be anything. You can do it. No, that's not true. It's
not true.
fundamentally untrue.
Yeah,
With the capacities that we have, intellectual, emotional, financial, educational, social, we can do what we can do, and God can make up the difference, to be clear. But like you said a few episodes ago, you know, some people have their upside capped. Not everybody's upside is the same. That's right. Intellectually, we know this. It might not be a popular thing to say, but there's people who are really brilliant. And then there's people who are not really brilliant, but are still really smart in other areas. And I think that the idea that we all have to be equal, I mean, even there have been a lot of studies done on twins, where they take twins, same home, same house, same rearing, same genetics, and they don't end up in exactly the same places, you know, in all of the ways that we measure success. No, there's variation because people are free. There's circumstances or situations. And I love the fact here that God gives to every person what's in their own best interest. Jeffrey, that's your point. 5, he's a 5-talent person. 2, you're a 2-talent person. And there are things that if you put me in charge of it, I would destroy it. There's capacities I don't have. If you put me in charge of those things, it's not that I don't have other capacities, but I would do very poorly there, and you would be doing me a disservice to put me in charge of something that's outside of my interest, my ability, my capacity, and so too with all of us.
Yeah, which has nothing, of course, to do with ontological equality.
No.
There's a legitimate equality. You use the word value. You know, there's an equality of innate value and ontological equality, but certainly there is no such thing as equality with regards to aptitudes, abilities.
Right.
And we're all wired differently, and that doesn't diminish anybody.
No.
What it does is it heightens our awareness of the necessity for cultivating personal responsibility.
There you
in
go.
whoever has 1, 2, 5, whatever you have, you can leverage what you have and grow it. Yes?
Yeah, and if you look at the actual passage, the man who created the investment, he gives the same response
Correct.
to the person
5 and
who
the 2.
had the 5 and the person who had the 2. It's the exact same response. He's equally happy
Brilliant.
with both.
No, that's incredible. That's
And it
that's
just
a
gives
great
for
point.
it gives for the feeling that we each contribute in a unique way.
Correct.
Right? If everyone had received the same talent for the same outcome, right?
Correct.
I'm replaceable.
Right.
Right? If I don't deliver,
Great
someone else will
Wow,
deliver.
this is a good
Great
point.
point.
Yeah.
But the fact that you have a different composition in you and mental capacity and et cetera means that we each do different things.
And we're irreplaceable.
Furthermore, these situations are not necessarily static, right? Like we don't know, there's other factors here. Maybe the 5-talent person has 10 years of experience, but the 2-talent person has 2 years of experience. So this isn't a static environment. There's a dynamism here whereby I don't have to stay a 2-talent person. God can grow, because actually, back to your point, and this is a point I was going to make later, but I'll just make it now. He says to both of them, you've been faithful in a small thing, relatively, comparably small. Now I'll put you in charge of many.
So that you could have
So
we
charged
can grow.
him.
both of
Yeah.
them get
Yeah.
the same opportunities
Here's
for growth.
I love that. Here's another question. Does it necessarily follow that the 5 talent is more important than the 2 or the 1, or even more valuable?
Definitely not more valuable.
Not according to this, because
not
the
the
master is
person.
perfectly happy with both.
I mean even the talent itself. Like, in other words, one servant could be given 1 talent versus the 5, and we immediately assume, whoa, the 5 is way more than the 1.
Well, the
But
Apostle Paul does something with this, with the body metaphor, doesn't he? That there are parts of the body that are, what's the word he used? Less comely or something like that.
Yeah.
There are parts of the body that provide vital functions, but aren't as noticeable and glamorous, so to speak, right?
Yeah, the many things could be the 5-talent person could have received 5 talents, and those 5 are little things that they do. The one, numerically, is only 1, but maybe that's a weighty talent. You guys follow what I'm saying?
Well, let me...
The 5 doesn't necessarily, I don't think, denote a higher value than the 1, just because numerically it's 5 versus 1.
I actually disagree there.
I don't know if that makes sense.
But I think I can make your point another way, which is that you've heard that we've all heard the saying, it takes money to make money, right? Like the people that I know that have considerable resources find it easier to make money than the people that have less resources because they have more opportunities, they have more networking. If they have a failure, it's not devastating because they made money over here, they lost money over here, and so if you're given 5, the guy who was given 5 didn't come back with 25. He came back with 5. The guy that was given 2 came back with what?
Another 2.
2. So that shows an equal aptitude or capacity there. In fact, you might even make the case that it would be harder to start with 2 and come back with 2 than to start with 5 and come back with 5. Because if it takes money to make money, the more liquidity that you have, right? In other
So
words,
the guy with 5 has an easier job than the guy with 1.
maybe. I'm not saying he does. I'm just saying that it's conceivable that, and I think this is why the reward is the same for both. He says, you've been faithful in a small thing, I'm going to put you over much. Right? Doesn't he say that? Let me read that. He says, well done, good and faithful servant. I'm in verse 21. Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you a ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of the Lord. And then here again, verse 23. Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of the Lord. So if I give you 5 and you come back with 5, and I give you 2 and you come back with 2, you have shown the same capacity, which is to double what I give you.
Yeah, and there's actually a verse in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 12, which is, for if the willingness is there, the gift is acceptable according to what one has, not according to what he does not have.
Yes,
It's the
thank
same.
you.
It's the same
What's
return.
that text? What's the text?
2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 12.
You're saying
That's
it's the
incredible.
same return on investment. It's the same ratio.
I don't understand what you were saying, though, when you said you began with 5 and he came back with 5. He began with 5 and came back with 10.
5 more, 5 additional.
Okay,
5
you weren't
extra.
using the word more.
5
so now
plus 5,
okay.
2 plus 2. In other words, each
doubled.
of them
He
doubled.
Yeah.
And presumably now he's seeing, and again, there's a dynamism here where you don't have to remain a 2-talent person. Isn't it really convenient that the word talent for weight means, well, aptitude or ability?
right.
That's cool.
Yeah.
But to move away from the financial world and into the sort of capacity world, we're changing. The person that I am today is not the person that I was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. I'm growing in aptitude. I'm growing in empathy. I'm growing in awareness. I'm reading. I'm learning. I'm studying.
Yeah.
I'm making more friendships. So even if there is a difference here, which there clearly is, the 1, 2, 5, we don't have to read that as any ontological or,
No.
No, this is just saying, this is where you're at, this is where you're at, this is where you're at.
But it is clear that you get out what you put in.
Correct.
So you can master almost any talent, by simply repeating and learning and growing and cross-pollinating with people who know more than you do. You can grow in your aptitudes.
Let me just offer one small correction there. We get out what God has put in, because neither of these is investing their own money.
Correct.
Right.
Right, but I'm making an additional point.
Yeah. No, I get your point.
God gave the original talents, right? But then you are called upon to exercise that your talent, your ability to invest. So hard work is legit.
Totally.
Right?
Oh, of course.
To apply your mind, to apply your body to a task is legitimate, and it's going to give back what you've put into it.
Yeah, the sort of hard work of bringing back an investment, that's not easy. I mean, to double your money is not easy. To double your resources is not easy. Now, we don't know the exact amount of time, but it says it was a long time. Right? Doubling your money's not...
If you hear somebody say, hey, give me, that money and I'll double it, you're in for a scam. I mean,
Right.
Am I right? I mean,
That's literally what she did for a living.
Yeah, that's why I looked your direction. I mean,
It's all a scam,
The
isn't
average
it?
mutual fund, you're only going to get 8 to 12%, right, over time. If somebody says, hey, if you give me $10,000 and I'll get you 20.
It's all based on risk, guys.
It's all based on
And
risk.
time.
Yeah, and time.
And time.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good point to pause on. We have to take a break, but when we come back, maybe you can instruct us on how it is you can get a 50% return.
The purpose of the Arise Intensives is to get people deeply and yet quickly into Scripture. It takes place just over a weekend so that they can have a feel for the shape of what we call the story of Scripture.
And our goal is to move through the key parts of the biblical story in such a way that you wouldn't just know biblical ideas with your intellect, but that we would reach in through your intellect into your heart, and that you would fall in love with Jesus as the most beautiful person in the universe. That's what our goal is. That's what we're up to. That's our agenda.
When people leave, what we're hoping they go away with is a new sense of how to think like a Christian, to think biblically.
Genesis to Revelation, not every detail, but the key truths of Scripture in one intense weekend, and that you would fall in love with Jesus.
Okay, looping back to where we left off, it looks like God gives something and then he says, now do something with it.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? This is free moral agency. This is God respecting the dignity of the individual and what he has given us. God, as our Heavenly Father, must be overjoyed to see us not just sit on our hands,
Yeah, there you go.
but to actually build with what he has given us and to grow what he has given us, right?
We talked about how he was a delegate in another discussion. We talked about how he's a delegator. He's not a micromanager.
I actually want to make that point a little bit later, but I've been preaching this very thing over and over again lately because I was asked to write a sermon for like an entrepreneurs conference, the Hive conference.
Right.
And they wanted me to speak on entrepreneurship. So I was like, what am I going to speak on? And what I did is I actually preached on Genesis 1 and 2, where God says to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And the idea is that God invites them to do what he had already been doing, which is creating and filling spaces, doing something with what he has. The resources that he has, do something. And then God makes Adam and Eve in his image and says, now you do something.
Yeah.
Do something. A capacity, a reproductive capacity has been given to you. An agricultural capacity has been given to you. Do something.
And I like, you just quoted Genesis. What about the word multiply? Be fruitful and multiply.
Right.
Right?
Don't just add, multiply.
So it's part of the human. So then it's part of the human race's original design and God's
Correct.
original
Yeah.
dream for every human to be a creator in some capacity.
Yeah, my good friend Jeffrey Rosario sent me a text to this effect just this morning.
What was it? Do you remember?
You sent it to me as well. I could quote it.
What was it again?
I don't have it in front of me.
It said that the desire,
testing you.
The desire or the ability to gain wealth is one of the original affections of the human race. That language is beautiful language because it's essentially saying that when God made us, he made us in such a way that it is innate to us to want to take something and grow it.
But don't forget the last clause.
What is it?
For a good end.
For a good end,
something
right.
Well, this is what God has
Like
said.
yesterday, you wanted a Lamborghini, and that's not a good end.
Well, this is exactly.
I'll go with the Porsche.
This is. I take a Porsche over a Lamborghini anyway, but that's beside the point.
I'll go with a Toyota.
I want the German engineering over the Italian engineering, but I don't want either, per se. If somebody wants to offer me a Porsche, I'll take it. Now,
I would take it, sell it,
There you
buy
go.
a Toyota.
So the point that I wanted to make there is that when God made the promise to Abraham, he was already a wealthy man, but he promised him even more. He said, take the resources that you have and I'll make you, your descendants will be like the stars of the sky, like the sand of the sea. In other words, God takes 1, 2, 5, whatever we have, and he says, grow it, multiply it. And think about this. One of the words that's used in the creation account, and it doesn't often come out in most of the modern translations, but it says that God filled the seas or he filled the skies. When it says the word there is that they were teeming with creatures and the land was teeming with animals. In other words, God doesn't just create a few. He's not being paltry.
So
he's not being
abundance is part of God's plan.
Think about a tomato, or think about a pepper. How many seeds are in there? That's a bunch, right? You take a tomato. If you planted every seed, and then you harvested those tomatoes and planted every seed, you have
Incredible.
That's the point. God has built growth into creation. So this idea that you sent in this text, it makes sense. We want to grow our families. We want to grow our wealth. We want to grow our intelligence. We want to grow our influence. Why not? We're made that way.
So it's not wrong to make money.
No, in fact, the Bible says it is God who gives you the ability to create wealth.
Correct.
Where is that text?
It's
Just so
Deuteronomy.
people.
Deuteronomy.
Yeah,
I
it
believe.
is God who gives you. Well, in Ecclesiastes, it goes so far as to say that not only does God give you the ability to gain wealth, but He's delighted when you enjoy the fruits of your labors, right?
Can I point out on that? Tell me if you think I'm going a little too far here, but if you look at verse 20 again, it says, "So he who had received 5 talents came and brought 5 other talents, saying, 'Lord, you have delivered to me 5 talents. Look, I have gained 5 more talents beside them.'" And then the same thing here in verse 22. "Look, I have gained 2 more talents beside them." This sounds to me more than like mere transactionalism. That look.
There's joy.
I hear joy there.
Yeah.
Excitement.
Yeah, I as a father, I hear my son saying, "Dad, look.
Yeah.
Dad, look." And so,
Look what I did with what you gave me.
okay, can I put something on the table here, and I'll kind of come to more of the punchline a little bit later, but I think what's on offer here is that this is largely, not entirely, but largely a story not just about us and our aptitudes and our returns on investment. I think it's a story largely about the character of the wealthy man. Okay? Now follow me. Jeffrey's got that
Which is the
I have the
character of
opposite.
God.
which is the character of God. You have the opposite
Yeah,
view?
but go ahead. I'm interested.
Okay, let me make my case here then, and push back.
And I'll
push
just
back.
prove you wrong afterwards.
Okay, I'm happy to be proved wrong. So the first there is the look, the enthusiasm. Okay. The second thing, this is quite interesting. When the person with 1 talent, look at verse 24. "Then he who had received the 1 talent came and said, 'Lord, I know you to be a hard man.'"
There's
Well,
an
that's
assumption
quite
there.
interesting.
He imagines him to be a hard man.
Right. Reaping where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. "I was afraid." This is interesting. "And went and hid your talent in the ground. Look, there you have what is yours." Now watch this. "But the Lord answered and said to him, 'You wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. You ought to have at least deposited my money with the bankers, and then I could have come back with interest.'" Do you notice the single difference between what the young man, or the man with 1 says, and the master, the wealthy person's recapitulation of what
The
he says?
recapitulation doesn't acknowledge the harshness of it.
Correct.
That's very interesting.
He leaves off hard.
In other words, you're right, but the motivation behind these
Correct.
circumstances, you're wrong.
Correct. Yeah, and so why does he perceive him as hard? We don't have to wonder, because he says, "I was afraid." When we're in a fearful state, one second here, Cynthia. When we're in a fearful state, we perceive hostility around us because it's a reflection of us and not a reflection of the actual situation.
projecting.
And when we're afraid, we conserve rather than risk.
Thank you. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. What were you going to say?
So I like what you're saying, which is basically that the third servant didn't understand who he was working with.
Correct.
Right? What I think is interesting, though, when my understanding, maybe this is wrong, but my understanding when he said, "You harvest where you have not sown and gather where you have not scattered seed."
Yeah.
I thought he was saying, "You're giving me the ability to, or the mandate to create a profit from the thing you gave me.
Correct.
But you're going to take it. Like, you're not going to let me keep it. You're going to take it from me."
Interesting.
No.
And
Okay,
so
keep
that's
going.
one piece. So I'm not going to get to keep the profit that I'm supposed to be generating. And then
Are
he
you
said,
saying, just so I can ask a question of clarification,
Yeah.
are you saying that this is what's going to happen, or this is what he
this is
thinks
what
is
he
going to
thinks
happen?
is going to happen. He's like,
Because it's clearly not what's going to happen.
correct, because we saw with the other 2 servants, but he was thinking, you're not going to let me keep the profit I'm going to work to
Correct.
create. And 2, I was afraid because maybe if I screw up, you're going to get really mad at me.
Right.
And that's why I just hid your gold. But then his master says, okay, well, if you thought I was just going to take your profit through the sweat of your brow, why didn't you just put it in the bank, and then they would have created the profit?
Some interest.
Some interest, and you wouldn't have to do anything. Just
Yeah.
at least have you actually generated negative ROI for me.
Right, correct.
Yeah.
That's really interesting that your first point, that I never thought about that he thought that he would never taste the fruit of his own
He's like
labors.
sweating to make profit.
So it's
He's not
interesting,
keeping
why
it.
is he the lazy one? Because when you feel like you don't have skin in the game, or when you're not going to benefit or taste any fruit,
Right.
that kind of saps your enthusiasm and your
Yeah, it's
motivation.
like, why would you know,
Why would I put in the
Why would I
work?
put in the work if I'm not going to keep any of the profit?
In the 1990s, when I went to the former Soviet Union to do evangelistic meetings there, it was astounding to see just the lack of motivation and lack of enthusiasm in people's various eyes and faces. And I began getting to know people and asking questions, and they said, "There's no incentive. There's nothing to drive any kind of
Innovation,
entrepreneurship
excellence.
or creativity. I mean,
Right, because there's a cap on
which
the
is
upside.
what you're describing, Jeffrey, is that really a human being needs to be put in a little bit of a challenging place in order to be fulfilled as a human being.
Correct.
We need to come up against obstacles that need to be surmounted in order
Thank you.
just to be content
To be
with
human.
our own identity.
To be human.
Yeah.
My, as you know, my oldest son Landon is getting ready to get married. He's young. He's only 21. He'll be 22 when he gets married. And his wife-to-be, she's wonderful. She'll be 21 when they get married. She's 20 now. So they're young. Not as young as you were, but they're young. And it's been so thrilling to see Landon, who's already a very responsible person. I used to joke that he was 15 going on 25, 15 going on 20, 17 going on 25, and now he's 20 going on 30. But he's already planning. I was talking with my son yesterday about when they will be having children and what his plan. I was just I was wiping this boy's bottom a few years ago, and now he's talking about having children. And here's my point. It has been the most gratifying thing so far as a parent to see my son grow into this role that will be difficult, that will be challenging, that will require risk, and he's going to have to venture. This is a big risk he's taking, but as a man, he's growing into that role, and just seeing the way that he's already thinking and planning about it, he's becoming the best version of himself. Right. Versus, let's just imagine him sitting in a basement, supported by mom and dad, playing video games, eating Cheetos, on the internet well into the night. No, that's not him. Yeah. He works at Olive Garden and he's waiting. He works at a landscape company. He's getting straight A's in school. He's preparing for a wedding. Mm-hmm. He is a man getting ready to be a husband, a house band, and not long after to be a father. And he knows that this is not going to be easy. So he's been placed
But it's going to be enjoyable.
But it's going to be enjoyable and it's going to be rewarding.
Things that aren't easy are enjoyable.
Correct. Now, do we have enough time? Okay.
We have time. We're only in segment 2, by the way.
Segment 2. I'm going to give you 10 reasons.
10?
10 reasons why I think...
How about 5?
I got 10. I got it here too. I'm going to give you 10 reasons why I think what's happening here is that largely this is a parable, a conversation about the character of the landowner.
Okay.
Okay? You got here, Jeffrey, here we go, because you said you were skeptical.
I am skeptical.
Number 1, he trusts his servants is a delegator, not unlike the man in the vineyard. Right? He goes away into a far country and he entrusts them, as we've already agreed, with large sums of money.
Yeah.
Okay? Number 1. Number 2, he has an awareness of his servants' aptitudes, so at some level he must know them.
And he sees good in them.
And he sees good in them.
Potential.
So he's aware of aptitude, so he must have some awareness. They're not just cogs in a machine. He knows them and he knows their individual aptitudes. In other words, he doesn't see them as fundamentally all the same. He sees them differently. Number 3, he leaves his estate or affairs in the hands of others. Right? Considerable estate in the affairs of others. This is very similar to number 1, where he trusts his servants. Number 4, these are large sums of money, so we can gather from that he is a trusting person. Right? He didn't leave them in charge of some, inconsequential thing. These are significant things that he's leaving them in charge of. Number 5, he speaks affirmingly and encouragingly to the 5-talent person. Right, doesn't he? Mm-hmm. Well done. Well done. Enter it. Okay. Number 6, he increases the opportunity and responsibility of the 5-talent person. Right? Number 7, he invites the 5-talent person into his own joy, which is fascinating. Right? I wrote here, which is that he invites him into his own joy. Enter into your master's joy. Number 8, he does all the same things with the 2-talent person, which shows that he is an understanding man who really knows the aptitudes of those employee and who doesn't discriminate on the basis of aptitude. Mm-hmm. Okay? What am I on? Number 8. I think I'm on number 9. He gives both the 5 and the 2 the same reward, which suggests that there is no favoritism. This is very much like the Beatitudes, where the very first Beatitude, blessed are the poor in spirit, is yours is the kingdom of heaven, and the very last, blessed are those that are persecuted for righteousness' sake, same reward, is the kingdom of heaven.
What was number 8? I missed it.
He does all the same things for the 2-talent person. And then number 10 here, he drops the adjective hard from the 1-talent man's description of him. In fact, he was trusting, generous, and was quick to affirm and reward. So I think that's what's going on here, that this is a referendum on the character of the person that has entrusted the disciples. And you think about it in the parable. These are private parables being spoken to the disciples. And this is Jesus. Well, what kind of a person is he? kind, generous, affirming,
yeah.
joyful, inviting them to give him an ROI, a return on investment.
And,
That's my take.
and this fits with session number 8, where we looked at John chapter 16, where Jesus said, I've been speaking to you in parables and figurative language, but the time is coming when I will speak to you plainly about the Father, because the Father himself loves you. Right? And so that is a retrospective lens where Jesus is saying, just so you know, all these parables I've been teaching, they were all about the Father. They were all about the Father all along, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, his 10 points are persuasive, yes or no?
I'll give you my take after the break. But, but I do think that's beautiful, and I think that's a
beautiful.
frame. That's a great frame to look at.
Yeah.
The one thing I'll say just before we go to the break is the difference here is that the one talent person, this is my opinion, fundamentally misunderstands the nature of the person he's dealing with.
The character of.
This initiative, this entrepreneurial spirit that the wealthy man clearly has, he has an expectation. He perceives that as hardness, but actually what it is somebody who's investing you with opportunity.
And that's what I want to. Yeah, that's what I want to comment on.
Okay, so let's take a break. We'll come back, and then Jeffrey can correct your theology.
I will receive any correction from good Jeffrey.
Closer Than Angels is a study of God's love for mankind that you will cherish and read over and over again. It is a message that will lift your mind to rare heights of spiritual contemplation and fill your heart with adoration for your Maker. To receive your free copy of Closer Than Angels, email info@lightbearers.org, call 877-585-1111, or write to us at Lightbearers, P.O. Box 690, Collegedale, Tennessee 37315. Once again, to receive your free copy of Closer Than Angels, email info@lightbearers.org, call 877-585-1111, or write to us at Lightbearers, P.O. Box 690, Collegedale, Tennessee 37315, while supplies last.
David, I think these 10 points that you made prior to the break are extremely persuasive. And Cynthia, during the break, you were making a point that we all were just super excited about. What is it that you were seeing in this?
So I decided to apply a little bit of my professional lens since I evaluate executives, et cetera. And as I was reflecting on the character of the master, I was thinking, wow, he's actually a really great boss. Yeah. He's someone I would like to work for because
love it.
He empowers his people. He's incredibly generous and kind and wants to celebrate your successes. So I thought he would be a really great boss to work for.
So this could be called the parable of the great boss. Really? I mean, it's just amazing that really the issue here again is the character of God. God is good, and he is doing all of these incredible things to give us the highest potential for success, and he takes joy in our success, right?
I love that. And the other interesting thing I thought about was a lot of times when companies are making decisions on talent, they're deciding, well, should we give this person a stretch opportunity? Do we think they could do it?
What is that, a stretch opportunity?
Meaning something that they've never done before, they've never really demonstrated they could do this.
They can grow into it.
Should we take a risk and give them a step up in role and responsibility and see what they can do with it? And I think it's interesting that the man who did nothing with his talent, the master probably knew it was a bit of a stretch for him. That's why he only gave him the one.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that he was willing, even knowing that this was going to be a stretch for him, he still gave him a chance.
So that's number 11, bro. In your list is that he's so good that even though he sees in this one talent guy, hey, this is going to be a stretch opportunity and you may not, but he's still so good
He's still
that
willing
he's
to
going
give
to
him
give
a
an
chance.
opportunity.
Because what's the alternative? To give none? Right? To give nothing is to resign.
Fire someone.
Right, hire somebody else. But
It would seem arbitrary because the person wouldn't have the opportunity to demonstrate.
he doesn't even get a shot.
Yeah. I think that when I read this parable, to piggyback on your one talent, these 10 points you brought out it's a great frame that we infer of the owner, right? But when I read this parable, I think it all hinges on verses 24 and 25. I think it's I think the punchline is the one talent person. And think about this for a second.
Well,
As
bring us
Jesus-
to 24. You just
I
said
can read that.
Yeah,
Those who-
what are we talking about?
Then he who had received, verse 24, then he who had received 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown, gathering where you have not scattered seed. And I was afraid and went and hid your talent in the ground. Look, there you have what is yours. I'm going to get to that in a second.
For some reason, when I read gathering where you have not scattered seed, I think about Monsanto, and I just can't stand that
That's
company.
a contemporary
But
application.
go ahead.
But my point is this. When Jesus is telling this story, he could have easily, he's making decisions here. Like, why is it that the warning is focused, laser focused on the 1 talent servant? Why not the 5 talent servant? Why the 1 talent servant?
Well, because he didn't bring a return on investment.
Right, but Jesus chose to make that the case. Why was it not the 5 talent person that didn't bring a return on investment?
Okay.
My point is there's a decision that was made there. And I think there's one pastoral point to be made here, and that is that the one that received the least was the one for whom the warning was for, meaning those of us who feel that we have very little to offer to God are the ones in greatest danger often of squandering that which God has already given us.
That's a great
I
point.
love that.
So that to me reveals the psychology of the underachiever here, right? We evaluate what we have, and often in comparison to other people, social media, whatever, we come to the conclusion, I
I got nothing to
got
contribute.
nothing to bring to the table here. What wow factor do I have to bring to the table? And when we've come to that conclusion, we are in the greatest danger of squandering the beautiful things that God has given us. So I think this warning,
That's a great point.
the whole parable eventually ignores the 5 talent guy or girl, ignores the 2 talent, and it hones in on the 1 talent. And then there's this statement that I think is really powerful. Look, the end of 25, verse 25. There you have what is yours.
Right.
And I think that's the psychology of the underachiever. And here's what I mean by that.
It's not mine. It's yours.
Well,
No, go ahead. I'm jumping ahead. Go ahead.
Yes, but not even that is what I was thinking. Here's what I'm thinking. He received 1 talent. He believes that at the end of this whole journey, by returning 1 talent, there you have what is yours. And I think that's where he made a mistake. Because the one who received 5 has 5 more, 2 more. In other words, the talent that you receive is pregnant with potential and possibilities. What belongs to God is not merely the initial original talent you received, but what belongs to God is all the potential that talent comes pregnant with.
Wow.
The acorn.
That's so
So
great.
when he
I like
says,
it.
there you have what is yours,
So good.
he's making a vital mistake. He doesn't understand like your point, who he's dealing with. Because what he received came with so much potential that you're literally robbing God not of the 1 talent, but of all the possibilities
Wow.
that came with
That's
that
right.
1 talent.
That's right.
And so in the context of the second coming, this is all, as we've been saying, Matthew 24, Matthew 25, when Jesus is thinking of the end, what does he see as the greatest danger? The individual who has come to the conclusion that he doesn't have much to offer.
Preach.
The whole thing hangs on that individual, not the wildly talented people.
Yeah, the prodigies. of
Jesus
the world.
ignores those people in this parable.
No, I don't think he ignores them. I think he empowers them.
I'm exaggerating on purpose. He's honing in on this 1 talent person. I think,
think
this is where
I think the 2
the
points-
oomph is in the parable.
I think the 2 points stand in perfect consonance with one another, that the landowner is good, that he's a good boss, and that we're not only responsible for the 1 that was given, but for all the potential that it is pregnant with. I love that. That gets back kind of to the tomato analogy, right? Like here's a tomato, you can eat the tomato, all of it, or you can take out some of the seeds, dry them, and plant, and then bring me back more tomatoes.
And your point, he knows us so well. The very hairs of your hair, remember, Matthew 10:30.
Yeah, thank
He
you.
knows us so well that he knows exactly what package, right, that we could most successfully,
Yeah.
work with.
Yeah.
So
The 1 talent guy is called a lazy and wicked servant. And if the points single powerful point that David has made, that this is really about the character of God, the character of the wealthy person with these 10 points, his wickedness and laziness is is precipitated by a bad picture of the character of God.
Correct.
If you believe beautiful things about God, you're going to reach, you're going to risk, you're going to venture.
Correct.
If you believe bad things about God, you're going to conserve and pull back and be safe and stay home and not venture.
Because you're primarily motivated by fear, not by joy, not by
Which is a form of
expectancy.
selfishness.
Just reflect back on the very first parable that we did in this sort of second half of our series, right? I think it was number 8, when we talked about the man that comes at midnight. And then Jesus, this is Luke 11, right? Jesus says, which one of you, if your son asks for a fish or asks for an egg, would give him a scorpion or a snake? And we made the point that earlier in Luke chapter 10, Jesus says, I give you authority over snakes and scorpions. So this is clear, and I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven, verse 18. In other words, God doesn't behave like Satan.
Right.
Well, that's kind of what's going on here. 2 of them are like, what an opportunity.
God is good.
God is I can't, 5 talents, 5, in your translation, bags of gold. Wow. And the other one, 2, this is great, this is amazing. The other one's like, oh no, what if this, and this is your point, Jeffrey, this is his. I don't want to mess up what's his.
And he's hard.
And I don't really have much to bring to the table. And so he hides it away. By the way, interestingly, did you notice, this is now another parable where digging factors in. He dug a hole and he hid it. And it did occur to me that we talked about the parable where somebody dug a hole and pulled out a treasure. And this is a parable where somebody digs a hole to hide a potential treasure. There's a lot of digging going on in these parables, which would be fascinating to explore that. But I love this idea here that what's on offer is an opportunity.
Potential.
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 So what he did was actually even worse, right? Because it was a negative ROI, right? Because even if he didn't want to work for it, he could have at least generated a small ROI through the bank.
Right.
So it was a negative return on investment. And I also want to connect this to everything we've been talking about around how the resources we have are supposed to be in service of the gospel.
Thank you.
And the piece that you said is that he doesn't see any potential with the one talent that he has. And he doesn't even want to try to help other people because he wanted to keep any profits for it from himself. That's why he said, you harvest where you haven't sown and gather where you have not scattered seed. He's like, I'm not going to work for this because I'm not going to get to keep any of it either.
Wow.
So he's
that's interesting.
very selfish.
And so
That's a really good
And so what does it
psychological
mean to
reading.
dig a hole and put the talent in and bury it? Would that essentially be saying that I have an ability, a talent, a capacity, and I simply choose not to exercise and grow it?
I view that as he's overly protective. He digs a hole and he hides it in the ground. He's worried that somebody might get to it. He's worried that something. So there's an excessive protectiveness here.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is what is it? What is it? What is the thing that he's protecting, hiding, burying in the ground? It's a talent. It's an ability.
What
it's
he
a
received from
capacity. And we know that as human beings, that whatever ability you have, if you exercise it, it strengthens, it grows, it develops. So this person is not maximizing his or her potential, right?
Not even not maximizing, not even attempting.
Not even
Nothing
attempting.
ventured, nothing gained, right?
So there's an opportunity
no
cost
effort
here.
made.
100%.
There's an opportunity cost, and that's why when he comes back to the master, he says, "Hey, here's what you gave me." He's like, "No, that's not what I gave you."
What's this language mean? An opportunity cost. Flesh that out.
That you factor in what could have been. For example, I went to school, I go to university, and I'm not working.
You did this, so you could have done this.
It's like going to like Oxford and then becoming a salesman or something like that.
What's the value of the thing that you could have done that you chose not to do with the resource?
While you're in school, you don't have a salary, and so that factors into what did it cost me to go to school? It wasn't just the tuition and the living expenses. The opportunity cost factors in.
What you could have done.
I could have had a salary every year of this much.
Right.
That's all part of the package. So I think there's some interesting economics going on here because he's evaluated also on the opportunity cost.
Agree. I like the, tell me what you think of this, verse 28. Therefore historically I've read this very negatively and very capriciously and quite arbitrary, but in the larger context of what we're talking about here, the goodness of the good boss, I read this differently now. So verse 28, therefore take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents. Well, why not? He has shown that he can be responsible with the resources that are given. If he gives him an extra talent, that's going to actually get 2. So all he's doing is he's entrusting the talent to someone who will actually do with that talent, back to Jeffrey's point about the potential, That makes sense. That's what
yeah.
any person would do.
All of us would do
All
that.
of us
If we
would
were-
do the
if we were
exact
giving
same thing.
someone assets for them to manage on our behalf.
Correct.
Right.
What do you all think of Luke chapter 16, verse 10, in light of this parable? I think this is kind of a heavy hitter as well. Luke chapter 16, verse 10.
This is the parable of the unjust steward.
Right.
Right.
This is Jesus speaking. He who is faithful in that which is least, or in little, is also faithful in much. And he who is unfaithful in the smallest of things is also unfaithful in much. So the point here is that this one talent servant is complaining, I only got one talent, this is not a big...
Right.
But the point is, he's revealing a mentality.
Yeah.
Correct.
Thus, if the same individual had been given 5 talents,
Would have wasted all of them.
he would have related to the 5 talents the way he related to the one, which is why it's super dangerous for us to be like, I would do so much more in the
If I
world.
had-
I would do so much more in the church, with God, with my neighbors, if I had what so-and-so has. No, you would be the same way you are now.
You'd be doing exactly what you're doing right now with what you have.
The only difference is that the opportunity cost would be much deeper,
Yeah.
and the crisis which would be much heavier, which is why God in his wisdom doesn't put you in that position because you're an idiot.
Totally.
Okay, that's one way of saying it.
It's like
Yeah.
it's like if you think about the if any of us were hiring someone to manage our assets, and you give them something and they don't do anything with it, you're like, are you going to give them more? Because
No,
like,
of course
they
not.
just didn't have enough resources to do something with my money.
So can I ask you a question about the work that you do specifically? I want to go back to that thing, what'd you call it, a stretch opportunity?
Yeah.
So you're obviously dealing with high capacity people, but I do want to ask a question. With the people that you're dealing with, in general, when people are given stretch opportunities, do they, more often than not, do they grow into those opportunities or do they fail in those?
Depends on the person. So it
So I'm
depends
asking
on
just big picture.
they-
In other words, is it generally a good idea to stretch somebody or to not stretch somebody?
if they
statistically.
if they have markers, we actually have markers of potential. So we have actually done research into what are underlying characteristics that suggest you are likely able to adapt and take on more.
Can you name 2 or
complexity.
3 of them?
Yeah, so one of them is cognitive. So what is their cognitive potential? And there's markers under that around how quickly do you connect dots, how strategically do you think at a high level about a situation, just how much mental horsepower do you actually have? So that's one of
Okay,
the markers.
cognitive.
One of the markers is emotional. So how well do you manage interpersonally with people? Do you understand how what you say, how that impacts other people can influence in a very deliberate way? Do you adjust your style with different people? And then there's a drive quotient. So this is how much desire do you have to have a greater impact on the world, on a company, on a business, right? So it's interesting that this guy, who knows about his cognitive potential, but he doesn't have much drive, clearly, and he doesn't understand his master.
So there's the emotional quotient as well.
Right.
You know what thank you for that. You know what I found so interesting? Jesus really launches the enterprise of teaching in parables back in Matthew chapter 13, where he tells those 7 parables back to back to back to back, right? And we've spent time on a lot of those parables. But listen to how the whole, and this is maybe a great place to sort of land our series here on the parables. Listen to how this starts. This is Matthew chapter 13, verse 10. And the disciples came to them and said, why do you speak to them in parables? Our series is Stories to Live By, right? Verse 11, because it has been given to you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. Verse 12, for whoever has, to him more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him.
That's actually here.
Exactly.
In verse 29.
It's the very same thing. Therefore, I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. I think these are truly parables to live by.
Yeah.
They're stories to
Yeah.
live. This is how to live. If you just studied nothing else, and I wouldn't advise this, but if you studied nothing else but just the stories of Jesus, you would have ample resources and opportunities to
A
live.
fulfilling life.
Yeah. Verse 29
Meaningful
is
life.
describing basic economics, isn't it? Yeah, everyone who has,
Right.
right? More will be given him. This is the law of exponential growth and compound growth. This has been super fun.
Yeah, totally.
This is number 13. We're done. I hope we get to
it's
do
been
this.
awesome.
I hope we get to do this again sometime.
It'd be fun.
And hopefully, people around the world who are tuning in are encouraged and motivated to get around a table and to discuss the Word of God. It's deeply enriching, and I've enjoyed it thoroughly.
Amen.
Thank you so much for watching Table Talk. I hope that this episode has been a blessing to you. Listen, I'd like to take a moment to express our heartfelt appreciation for the fact that you share our passion for taking the gospel to the world as fast as possible to as many people as possible. Your financial support and your prayers are vital to this ministry. In fact, indispensable. So we're grateful and we want you to know that. If you're interested in partnering with us to create more episodes like this one, please visit our website at lightbearers.org. And once again, thank you for joining us and your ongoing support.